So the Pokemon Legends series are known for being the mainline games that really push the envelope when it comes to the Pokemon experience. At least so far with the one Legends game we have, so I guess that's kind of a funny thing to say. Either way, Pokemon Legends Arceus showcased Game Freak's desire to experiment and shatter pretty much every norm they've established thus far. No one could have predicted the structure of this game ahead of time. No one expected the player character to have their own health bar, for there to be boss battles we needed to tackle both physically and in strategic Pokemon battles, that the Unknown Quest was going to exist at all, that we'd have side quests in general, that the village we hub in would grow, that alpha Pokemon would be a thing, that we'd be able to climb mountains and fly, and even before the game was teased for the first time, we never expected to get a Pokemon game where we'd even be able to aim and throw a Pokeball to catch them in real time. I hope that rundown reminded you just how shocking that breaking of boundaries was for us as fans when Legends Arceus released. And even more so, I want us to use that reminder to point a finger at the possibility that we could have no idea the kinds of mechanics we can see added in Pokemon Legends ZA. I've already talked about returning mechanics we might see and how they could evolve in a previous video, which I'll link you to at the end of this one, but today, I want to talk about the possible new mechanics we could see for the first time ever in the Pokemon series with Legends ZA. If Game Freak truly wants to use this series to experiment and shock us, then I have a few ideas for what we could see. So, let's dive right in. The first new mechanic we could see from Legends ZA is a page taken straight out of the Tears of the Kingdom playbook. Much like Legends Arceus, which was inspired heavily by Zelda Breath of the Wild, I do think ZA will be inspired by the sequel, Tears of the Kingdom. The biggest way I think we'll see comparisons is a map that extends vertically rather than horizontally. Obviously, we know the map will take place solely in the dense city of Lumiose, so of course, Johnny, the map is going to extend upwards because of buildings, right? Duh. Okay, well, that's one way it'll build itself vertically, but I'm thinking of taking it 2 steps further. I believe there will be a sky area above and an underground area below that we'll get to explore in Lumiose. We've already talked in depth on the channel about the Paris catacombs and even the Parisian sewer system, so I think that the underground will be Pokemon's fictional version of these spots, especially the catacombs. In real life, these are abandoned mines that have been repurposed as mass graves, to the point where we can see skulls sticking out of the walls in every turn. The timeline for Legends ZA likely takes place in the past, so it would probably be during an era where the catacombs of Lumiose are active with ghost Pokemon and maybe even fossil Pokemon. It could also ultimately be the resting place of Zygarde or Yveltal. Zygarde would make sense because it's said to reside in a cave, but Yveltal could also take its spot as Yveltal represents death, and I mean, hey, it doesn't get more morbid than the Paris catacombs, am I right? Now, beyond the underground exploration, I think we'll also see a sky area above the clouds. I actually wonder if ZA will reverse market this compared to Tears of the Kingdom, where that game marketed the sky area, but the underground was kept as a surprise for fans when they finally got their hands on the game. Perhaps Game Freak will market the underground for ZA as it's a more obvious location, and save the sky area for the player's surprise. Regardless of how they market it though, in the sky, if it goes above the clouds, we could see some story revolving around Mega Evolution and its origin. Perhaps Mega Rayquaza and some other Gen 3 Mega relevant Pokemon can be obtained here, as Mega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire had deep ties with both Mega Evolution and even space. Conversely, perhaps this could be where Yveltal rests, as it is a winged Pokemon after all. Speaking of which, the sky area is also possibly where we could see the return of sky battles from X and Y, but of course, brought to us in some new form for the Legends formula. The possibilities are endless, and we could see some crazy things if this map really is structured for vertical traversal. Like, maybe, completely different kinds of ride Pokemon. Imagine a ghost-type Pokemon being a ride of sorts to replace the Ascend ability from Tears of the Kingdom, where it lifts us up and helps us phase through buildings and other physical objects. Or maybe, flying Pokemon will just straight up fly instead of glide, kind of like the ability you can unlock at the end of Scarlet and Violet's DLC. I'm gonna stop myself there, because there really is an endless amount of crazy ride ideas we could have, so I actually want to challenge some of you in the comments to come up with some more. Write them down and we can all look at them and see what our favorite ideas are. Anyways, moving on to other new mechanics we could have in Pokemon Legends EA. The next thing I want to discuss is how GameFreak might evolve Pokemon battles. In Legends Arceus, we saw Pokemon run up and hit each other for the first, and so far, the only time in mainline. Yeah, it was the only game that made sure physical attacks looked like they actually connected, well, physically. And to me, that was a huge win. On top of that, if a Pokemon missed an attack, the Pokemon that dodged would let out a war cry to signify that they did something. It's no dodging visual, but it was better than nothing because it made it seem like your Pokemon was taunting the other one for missing. I also probably don't have footage for this, so I'll show you Oshawott yelling at my trainer for walking into him instead. Yeah, they did something like that in the game. Okay, but my point is, what if Game Freak actually does create animations for dodges, and even status effects this time around? The reason I'm thinking about this is because of the dynamic battle we saw in the teaser trailer. In this, it showed Aegislash coming up close to Sylveon to attack, but she dodges backwards before doing her move. Now, I know this isn't actual gameplay footage, but a lot of what is showcased in that teaser were clearly proofs of concept, and I don't see why this battle should be any different. Dynamic battle visuals could be an insane addition to the Pokemon series, the likes of which we haven't seen outside of Pokemon Battle Revolution. And even that could get showed up by Game Freak if they truly bring the battle visuals up to modern standards. This is all food for thought though, at the very least, but I do hope we see battles take a more exciting turn going into ZA. Now, another likely mechanic we could see added to Pokemon Legends is voice acting. Arceus experimented with this a little bit. The player character actually did have a voice in that game, however it was delegated strictly to grunts and no actual dialogue was spoken. The fact that Game Freak paid someone to voice grunts for the game though, is an extremely positive sign that we could see full-on voice acting in the near future. And what better game to experiment that with than the progressive Pokemon Legends series? Pokemon Legends EA could actually be the first game where we finally receive full voice acting in mainline. If they do this though, I do think they'll pull a Zelda and not give the main character dialogue and just keep that character to having grunts. There is a possibility though, that this isn't the game Game Freak wants to try out voice acting with, in which case, there's something else I would encourage them to try instead, and that is text tones. If you've ever played a game like Ace Attorney or even something closer to home like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, you know what I'm talking about. Those games have sounds that play over the text as it writes itself in the dialogue box. Oftentimes, they even have different pitches for different characters. It's a little thing you might not even realize consciously, but subconsciously, it goes a long way in keeping player attention. Why else do you think people are so okay with playing a game like Ace Attorney, where it's 90% reading? Another version of text tones could be implemented, which is repeated vocal sounds for text. If you've ever played Okami or Banjo-Kazooie, you know what I'm talking about. As the dialogue box writes itself, the character speaking just repeats a generic sound as it does so. These two examples may be a little too goofy for Pokemon, I think, but something more akin to Midna's voice from Zelda Twilight Princess could work. It's repeated sounds, but Midna still manages to sound sophisticated and keeps the serious tone of the game. So that's an example of how Game Freak could implement this in a tasteful way for Pokemon. Finally, I have an extra crazy idea for a mechanic we could see in Pokemon Legends EA, and this one involves Hoopa. If you recall, in Legends Arceus, there was a mechanic called space-time distortions. These were random parts of the map that would become encased in a rift that transports Pokemon from different times and spaces to the present. It was a way to get Pokemon that couldn't exist in the Legends era to be obtainable, either with a futuristic item like the Metal Coat appearing, or the future Pokemon themselves, like Scizor or Porygon, popping up to be battled or caught. Now, in Pokemon Legends EA, this mechanic wouldn't make any sense, so I think something entirely new will take its place. As we know, Hoopa is a Gen 6 Pokemon and has the ability to open up hyperspace holes. In Legends EA, we'll probably see hyperspace holes open up in different parts of the map. Now, when we enter these holes, we'll be transported to a different dimension, so the area we're in will likely change in appearance or maybe even resemble something further in the past or further in the future. Conversely, perhaps the hyperspace hole affects the entirety of Lumiose City. What if there are designated areas to activate the hyperspace holes and willingly enter a different version of Lumiose entirely? Whether it takes us further into the past, like I said, before Lumiose was built at all and was maybe a wild area, or maybe the future, or simply a different dimension that varies from the Lumios we know from our designated timeline. If hyperspace holes can't traverse time, then it could simply be like having a light and dark world, similar to Metroid Prime 2 or Zelda: A Link to the Past. Or what if hyperspace holes literally just transport us somewhere else entirely? Maybe outside of the city? GameFreak has many options for how to implement this, and honestly, all of them sound intriguing. But what do you guys think? What mechanics do you think we could see added that no one else has thought of? Comment them down below, and afterwards, check out more of my videos like this one here, where I discuss mechanics that should return and evolve from Legends Arceus to ZA. I've been JotoJohnny, and I'll catch you all there.